Hey YouTube, Gordon Miller here. I'm going to start translating some of my Quora answers into videos so that the content is more accessible to more people. So I had I had provided a number of answers and comments that had components of this answer in it, and I had not compiled it all into a single answer. And I will link to the actual text. This is the post on Quora, and I asked the question. I rarely ask a question and then answer it myself, but I needed the question to be asked in the proper context so that I could provide the answer. And it wasn't done to be salacious necessarily, but it certainly hopefully will get some attention. The question was, are strippers mostly drug addicts and prostitutes? And of course, the answer to that is no. I make a case for the fact that, and I'll go into some more detail about, what's the context of my understanding of the industry and the marketplace. It was via due diligence for a deal that I was offered. So I first want to talk about the fact that it's a huge industry. I mean, it's multi-billion-dollar industry, and it's no secret that sex sells, and that there are people who have an opportunity, especially young women at the ages of 18 to 29, and some people say as late as 35. But I think the majority of people who are making a go of it are in the 18 to 29 category. But there are billions of dollars spent each year in the adult entertainment industry, and specifically in the strip club kind of environment. So it's a huge reality. So I'm not. It's not a judgment call. If it's not your thing, that's fine. It's not even. I'm not judging one way or the other. It's just a reality that it's a huge part of the economic reality of the United States, at least. So the next section of the answer talks about motivations and the decision to make the choice to try that industry segment. And what the point that I was making was that really, if you take a look at it, there are very few ways that young women ages 18 to 29 can literally legally make $100,000 a year working part-time, working less than 30 hours a week. And I've had people comment, and I've had people approach me about the fact that, I make $10,000 a month. I work 28 hours a week. I work at night. I have no other job during the day, but I can take care of my child and, things like that. And I think those are real economic realities for people. And I think that you have to understand that most of the people that I interviewed during the process of this due diligence that I'll talk about here in a minute were like nursing students or medical school students or lawyers, law school students, or they were biochem majors, getting their master's in organic chemistry or biochem and stuff like that. These are professional women that don't want to graduate with $200,000 worth of student loan debt. And so a viable trade for the 3 or 4 years or 4 or 5 years or 7 years of its medical school, is to acquire the funds necessary to attend school and to pay for your life and support your kids or whatever else you might have at that point, by doing something that has a high dollar return for a limited amount of time that you would put into it. And I don't begrudge anybody that choice. In fact, I've been amazed at how many super intelligent women there are that are destined for professional careers that spent a portion of their time as strippers when they were in either college or graduate school or both. The interesting part about it is that I think that it's an option for some women, not for everybody. I mean, I think you have to view it in the right context. My concern is that there isn't a significant amount of proper orientation or information in that industry. And I think the industry is becoming more apathetic. I don't think club owners and the whole general experience is very positive. And so I would like to, I would like to see reforms in the industry to create the right kind of opportunities that would then stimulate better opportunities for people to consider it. So um, the one thing that I go on to observe next is the fact that um, based on based on some of the people that I interviewed, there is a portion of those women that are working that that did have some type of uh, traumatic childhood sexual experience. So whether that was that they were raped by a family member or something like that, and so in those cases, they tend to report that that they feel an enormous amount of empowerment about taking back control over their sexuality when they were sexually objectified as a child by an adult. And the men who would seek to objectify them, sexually in the clubs, they control that experience. They control the just what they're willing to put up with, and the clubs have rules and stuff like that. So the girls are relatively safe in terms of all that. But the I know a number of people that I interviewed had said that they found the experience to be transformative and therapeutic, and I think that that's an interesting perspective on that. I think that there is a growing wave of women who were abused as children, that were abused from the ages of 3 to the ages of 13 or 14, that are coming up over the next 10 years through the system, that I think we're going to see an enormous a number of people looking to take advantage of that as an opportunity. So I think that club owners are going to have their pick of people who are willing to consider that as an opportunity. And for anybody who has, received that kind of negative sexual attention as a child, regardless of whether it's being raped or just being molested or being touched inappropriately without it being overtly sexual, whatever the situation is, it's about power and control. I mean, rape is about power and control, not sex. So being able to take back the power and control is a universal theme in some of these situations. So, so in answer, the reason I posed the question the way that I did is the next section talks about the dark side of the industry. And that's really more about the reality that, are there women with substance abuse issues, alcohol and drug issues, and things like that? Yes, yeah, there are. Are there women who resort to prostitution in the context of either the club atmosphere or outside of the club? And the answer is yes, there is. I mean, for sure. But I don't think I think that's on the far end of the bell curve. I mean, I think it's on the low end of the curve. I don't see that as being sort of the norm in the middle. I see that as being at the other ends. And so I think that it's important to understand that while that is a reality for some people, it's probably not the majority of everybody's experience. And so it's not fair to characterize everybody in that situation as being an addict or an alcoholic, or being willing to have sex with people in the club. So I don't think that's fair. So I was asked by a friend of mine. The reason I have this this experience is because I was asked by a friend of mine to purchase a club that he had. He was going to jail because he ended up having sex with one of the girls, and she used a fake ID to get into the club and dance at 17. Her father found out about it and found out that she had sex with the club owner, and then pressed charges, and then the club owner went to jail. So I don't think that that's, I mean, if she says she's 18 and she shows ID that says she's 18, and, you end up having sex with her, the reality that, you're not going to, are you going to require a birth certificate for everybody? I mean, come on. I mean, she showed ID. I think that was a bad deal. And it goes back to my other video about the whole system and the way the whole system works. I mean, I don't think he should ever have gone to jail for, having sex with a 17-year-old person who represented they were 18 by showing an ID and had been dancing in the club, when it's illegal to dance in the club unless you're 18. So I just don't think that those kind of things are practical and reasonable. I mean, he thought she was 18. So the so before I told my buddy no, I wanted to. My initial reaction was no. I'm not interested in buying the club. The idea is that I was going to buy the club from him for $1 and run the club while he was in jail, and then sell the club back to him for $1, and we would share in the profits during the time he wasn't there. And so I did my due diligence on a project like this, because I mean the club's making an enormous amount of money, and I was interested enough to do the research, and I interviewed a number of the girls, and I began to do more industry research and looking at, talk to the other club managers, and interviewed people at other clubs and things like that to kind of understand where the club fell in the hierarchy of clubs in the area, and understand kind of what's driving some of that. So in the process of doing that, I began to realize that there's enormous room for improvement in the industry, and that it's an economic reality for a number of these women. These young women are 18 to 29. They're going to choose to make $10,000 a month, and I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm saying that, more power to them. That's great. Congratulations. But I would like to see some reforms. And so I went through a list of things with my buddy that were things that I had observed that I would like to see changed. And so I said, look, if I'm going to end up owning the club, I mean, the club's under my name, and I don't want I'm not happy with the way the industry is working. I would like to affect these types of changes. And so he listened to my list, and he laughed, and he's like, well, that would cut into the profits way too much. And I'm of the opinion that while the things that I'm suggesting cost money, I think ultimately the result would be making more money. And I can't prove it unless somebody actually implements it, but which I'd love to do, actually. And I make the appeal on Quora that, if you're a club owner and you're interested in, working together to kind of, set up this blueprint for the way the industry should operate, then I'm all about it. I mean, reach out and let's figure it out. But it's I kept all this information to myself because I hoped that one day I would get around to doing it. Well, I'm 55, and chances are I'm probably not going to open my own club. I would much rather work with a club owner to help provide these kinds of solutions. And there's actually a few clubs out there that I understand have adopted some of these already. So I guess they came to their own conclusion about this information. And so I'm grateful that these are not new ideas. I don't corner the market on good ideas. I'm just saying that, after my extensive research and interviewing close to 100 women who work in the industry, I got a good idea of what's wrong with the industry. And so I'm going to go ahead and read you the list, just so I have a record of on video. So first of all, I think that there's, number one, is that there's room to treat women with respect. I think that, the industry treats them all like 1099 employee or 1099 contractors, not employees. And that most club owners think of the women as disposable. If they show up next week or not, they don't care. And I think that's really the wrong attitude. I think that an atmosphere of respect is really necessary. These women are making the club owner money, and they're making money for themselves as well. But I think that any club owner who doesn't appreciate and respect the fact that these women are a valuable asset and resource aren't really thinking about it properly. There you go. Sorry. So the reason that they haven't been traditionally too worried about treating the women with respect is because there's another 18-year-old coming through the door right behind them if they decide to walk out the door. But I think that that's really kind of the wrong answer, because that 18-year-old doesn't have the right kind of perspective on the industry or the experience to really kind of generate the right kind of revenue opportunity. And we'll talk more about that. But so number two, if it were up to me, I would provide general education support. I would make sure that everybody got their GED or graduated from high school, and I would create scholarship opportunities for women who wanted to go to college. I would make attending classes at community college a thing, and I would like to see these women at least get an associate's degree, if not go all the way and get a 4-year bachelor's degree. Now, I mentioned that there's a number of women in nursing school and medical school and law school and a bunch of other things. That's more the exception than the norm. They're on this end of the bell curve, as opposed to the drug addicts and prostitutes that are on this end. And there's a bunch of other people right here in the middle that are the majority of people. So for the majority of people who are going to make this a career and don't have a whole lot of options afterwards, then, I think, we want to fill that majority of the spectrum, that's 60% or more, 60, 70%, you want to address those kind of needs pretty effectively. So the best thing that they can do then is get an education during the process. So they can take classes during the day, they can work at night, things like that. So number three, I think that it's important to provide substance abuse counseling. I think that there are a number of women that don't have really kind of the proper drug and alcohol, they don't have a handle on proper usage. I think that, the worst example I had was the fact that there was one club that I interviewed somebody, and she was clearly on opiates and mixing opiates with alcohol, and she was just excessively intoxicated to the point where she was at the point of slurred speech and loss of motor control and things like that. And it's 1 o'clock in the morning, and the club's open for another hour. And so she's not making any money. She's just making a mess of the situation. And she's actually ruining the experience for the other people and ruining other people's opportunity to make money. So it's, those kind of things I think are inevitable in that there'll be some people, but having people show up or end up showing up fine, but end up too drunk or too high while they're trying to work is not really helpful. So number four, provide psychological counseling. A number of these women do have some kind of considerable trauma in their lives, childhood trauma or other things, and rape or incest or just general physical abuse, all sorts of things that they've never really dealt with. So I think that it's important to be able to help people get the help that they need to deal with that. Now, that may mean that they quit the industry, because I think that, that may be the advice of their therapist and things like that. But, I've seen a number of people that, are working through their quote unquote daddy issues, at the club. And, I think that it would be important to provide some kind of psychological counseling. I mean, I think that majority of these women don't need it, but for the ones that do, I think it's important. So number five, I think it's important to provide transportation to and from work. And that may be reimbursement for Uber or stuff like that. I think that that's important. I mean, first of all, none of these women should be driving. Most of them don't have cars that are reliable, or some don't have cars at all. They rely on somebody else for transportation. But we don't, they may be drinking during their shift at the club. They may get into a car accident and then break a leg or, get their face messed up or something like that. They can't earn any money for the club, can't earn any money for themselves if they're injured or sick or other things like that. They also can't do it if they're incarcerated. So a DUI, which results in a 30-day jail sentence, is not going to help them generate any money for the club. So, it's in the club's best interest to do that. I mean, even if it's a $20 ride back and forth to work, then, so be it. Whatever it is, I think it's important that they provide transportation, or at least transportation reimbursement. It's a huge impediment. I mean, think about how most college girls on campus don't have a car because they're away from home. There's transportation at school, and the club nearest the college may not be the one that offers the best opportunities, but they're also not going to spend a majority of what they make in a night, providing transport, using Uber back and forth to work. The girls that make $10,000 a month, obviously they Uber all the time. But the reality is that I think it's important that the club reimburse for the transportation expenses. And I don't think that's unreasonable. I think that it's a small price to pay. If somebody's making, a fair $1,000 or $2,000 a night for the club, what's $20? I mean, I just don't see. I don't see that as a significant expense. So number 6. I think that the clubs should provide childcare, and this is supervised either in-home childcare for the women or like a daycare kind of setting, only sort of night care. But I think that a number of women have kids. Out of the 100 that I interviewed, I would say somewhere around half had a child, most of them a daughter for whatever reason. And I think that, they entrust that daughter to a family member or a friend or things like that. The problem is that, and those are typically the women that grew up in a cycle of abuse and those kind of things. My concern is that their daughter will end up getting abused by whoever's watching them, and then the cycle will just continue to repeat itself. And so if you want out of that, perpetual downward spiral of society, I think you need to be intellectually honest about the reality of that. So I think that providing childcare for the women who work for the club would be a great step in the right direction. Doesn't cost very much, especially on a per person, per child basis. So I think that while they're working, having childcare for them, while they're going to school, I think would be a nominal overall expense for the club. Number 7, provide group health insurance. So either at a low cost or, I'm not necessarily suggesting it be free, but I think a lot of these women don't have health insurance either for themselves or for their children. And so they end up not taking their child to the doctor. The child gets sicker for longer. The mother has to stay home to take care of the child and can't work. And that's money that it costs the club. So $70 a month, something like that, $80 a month, you're talking about, $20 a week or $4 a day or something like that. They're incremental costs and they do add up. But I think when you look at the whole, I think that you're going to make that back time and time again. So number 8, providing financial counseling. So I think this is enormously important. So you're talking about women who may have only other job may have been working for $9 an hour at $9 or $10 an hour at Burger King or McDonald's for 30 hours a week. So they're going to go from making $300 a week to making $300 in a single hour in the club. And so we're talking about people that didn't even make $10,000 a year are now going to make $10,000 a month. And so with that enormous increase in financial ability becomes an enormous increase in financial responsibility. And so I think that it's important that the right kind of financial counseling to help people get on a budget and spend correctly, not living above their means, helping them to budget, helping them to save and invest and things like that. If you were to live on half of what you made and invest and save the rest, and over a 10-year period from 18 to 28, you would, if you're making $100,000 a year, which is completely doable, then you're looking at investing $50,000 a year over a 10-year period. The result with the compounding interest is almost $1 million when it gets to the end of the 10 years. So there isn't a single person who devotes 10 years to the industry that should necessarily have less than $1 million in the bank. It just isn't, it's unconscionable to me that somebody would be in the profession for several years and literally have, less than 10 grand in cash. And I think that helping people manage that money is a responsibility. I mean, I think it's a necessity. Otherwise, they just blow the money and they become dependent, and then they turn 30 and they're not making that money anymore, and they don't have any money, and now they've got no education and no future and no savings and no investments and nothing. So I just think that that's horrible. I mean, I think that, it's an opportunity, take those 10 years and help people understand how to build a future with that. And if you have $1 million in the bank and well invested, it can throw off, somewhere around 80 grand a year. You can live off of the 70 to 80 grand a year and never touch the principal and never have to work again in your life. I mean, I just think it's a matter of people having the right kind of perspective on that. So, so that's the financial counseling. Number 9, I think it's important to provide in-house loans at a fair and reasonable interest rate. As the girls are getting started and as they're starting to make their initial money, they are going to have expenses that they're not going to be able to cover immediately. It's sort of like, and the payday loan industry is just eating them alive. I don't encourage anybody in that situation to carry an enormous amount of debt, but I think that it's important that these women aren't being taken advantage of. They're not being, there are predatory lenders out there that will be glad to, provide them cash. And unfortunately, the fees are so high that it's hard for them to get ahead. So I think it's important to provide an in-house loans at a fair interest rate. And I jokingly said in my answer that, think of it as sort of a stripper credit union model. And where, all of the talent, all the entertainers are members, and they all take care of each other. And I think that that's a great model. So number 10, provide affordable, high quality housing. And this is something that has really come to the forefront here recently, where there's no reason that the club owner who's making, mid 6 figures a year, they're putting $500,000 a year away. And there's no reason why they couldn't own an apartment building and run it at a decent level. They're making more money off the girls, in the club than they would off of rent. So, rent doesn't have to be crazy expensive. You're not trying to make a profit. You're just trying to cover your cost. And, you're not trying to gouge the girls. You're trying to create a stable, clean, safe, effective home environment. So if it were up to me, the club owners would own real estate, not necessarily near the club or net whatever, but in a safe, productive, area, and encourage the girls to, rent 1, 2, and 3 bedroom apartments, and create the opportunities for them to do well and be safe. And this also helps in the coordinated healthcare and childcare situation. So if you're doing in-home childcare and you have an 80 unit or a 50 unit or a 40 unit apartment building, and it's easier to monitor and manage and maintain all the kids in like the clubhouse for that area, and the parents can pick the kids up on their way home and whatever. But it's an important opportunity that I think there is that high quality housing, so they don't live somewhere horrible. They don't live around IV drug use or other types of unneeded activity. It would be a safe place for everybody to be. So number 11, provide career counseling. So one of the things that, I'm a huge fan of the idea of, if you're going to do this between 18 and 29 or 18 and whatever, if you're graduating from the nursing school and whatever, the nurses, the doctors, the lawyers, the scientists, things like that, you've got your future ahead of you. You already know what you're doing. The drug addicts and folks in the prostitution side of things, you know, let's hope that we can move more of you to the middle where there's a lot of opportunity. But the opportunity, though, I think, is to help understand how these women who develop incredible skills in sales, marketing, and customer service, those three areas are enormous skills. And these women have 10 years of experience if they go from 18 to 29. And so having 10 years of sales experience or 10 years of marketing experience, 10 years of customer service experience is enormously valuable to large corporations. And I don't think anybody is really taking notice of just what an untapped market that is. So I would propose that there are career counseling as well as placement opportunities to get these women placed into these highly social career opportunities once they turn 30. And they've got their own money, they've got savings and things like that, but helping them make the transition or helping them start their own business. That's another option as well. So that's the next one. So 12 would be to provide angel investment or venture funding for business startups. So if these women have, a number of these women are super intelligent, and if they have an idea that is worth funding, that providing angel investment, investing alongside of them. So if they've saved 100,000 or 50,000 or whatever, they want to, or they've saved 500,000 and they want to put 50,000 or 100,000 into a business of their own, helping guide them through that process of doing the business the way it should be done, I think is a great idea. And so think of it as, instead of Shark Tank, it would be like Stripper Tank. But the whole idea is that these women have great ideas. They have great interest in beauty and fashion and cosmetics and fitness and a bunch of other areas where they would be tremendously beneficial in creating opportunities for themselves. And I think that there are those kind of opportunities out there. Apparel, all sorts of things. So 13 is provide career counseling or provide peer counseling. So the idea is that women who have been through the program, who've gone from 18 to 29 and then moved on and gotten placed into Fortune 500 companies or whatever, and then or started their own business, that those people come back and that they contribute to the next generation of 18, 19, 20-year-olds who need role models to help them understand, look, I've been there, here's the situation, here's what you have to look forward to, and walking them through all that. I think that's a tremendous benefit, to know that there's a future, to know that there's a career path, to know that there's something out there beyond, the horizon that they're working towards. And I think that that's an incredible opportunity. And I think that not enough of that is done these days. And then the last thing is number 14 is to provide professional mentoring services. And so, I've been mentoring people now off and on for the last 25 years, and I've been mentored myself. And I spent much of the last, since 2008, so much of the last 10 or 12 years in that mentorship role where as I've helped other people start and grow their companies, then I've begun to realize that there's an opportunity there. So, I talk about in my answer, I talk about how the fact that, I really want to change 1,000 people's lives, and I want 1,000 people to show up at my funeral. And so, of course, if I end up helping 1,000 people in the stripper industry, the idea of having 1,000 blondes show up at my funeral in the perfect little black dress is just, it's an exciting possibility. So anyway, it's a vision I have for my funeral that, 1,000, really attractive young women all in little black dresses, who have had their lives substantially changed in some positive way by these kind of reforms in the industry. And I think it's important. Right now the industry is, these women who are 18 to 29 are babysitting, they're nannies, they're in childcare, they're in food service, they're in, they're waiters or waitresses or bartenders, and they're they're just not many really good roles. I mean, they have office and support staff kind of positions. Most everybody's making below $15 an hour, and there's no way that you can work enough hours at wages like that are going to be able to allow you to also go to school and not necessarily incur a massive amount of debt. So I just think that I'm not suggesting everybody become a stripper. I'm just saying that it's an option that's out there that a lot of people take advantage of. And for the people who do take advantage of it, that find it to be both lucrative as well as enjoyable, not everybody thinks it's a disaster, that those people are well suited for that profession. And if they're going to be well suited for it, I think they should be well taken care of. And that was my only comment. And so, but that's how I ended up with my experience on the due diligence, and that's what the research that I did resulted in. And the video is 36 minutes long. My God, it's my longest video ever. So if you stayed up until now, then terrific, thanks. But I just want to say thanks to my buddy who provided me the opportunity for that. Obviously, he turned me down because obviously all of this stuff cost money. It would cut into the profits of the club. But I do believe that somebody out there who is a club owner right now sees the benefit. They may even be doing 2 or 3 of these. I understand the Spearmint Rhino and a few other places like that already have 2 or 3 of these, that they do on a regular basis. And that's terrific. There's 12 or 14. I guess there's 14. So, there's 14 of them. So you guys are already doing 2 or 3. Well, that's good. We got another dozen to go. So, but, please reach out. And if you're in the industry and you find that what I've had to say here has value and you want to reach out, I'm happy to work with you to figure out, how to make the best use of the time and the opportunities that you've created for yourself. And, I don't have a package to sell. I'm not looking to book time. I'm looking to help figure out solutions that manifest themselves in ways that help people. And so, at some point I may end up putting everything together into a package that somebody can utilize to keep me from having to have 1,000 phone calls. But right now, at least, for now, I'd like to, again, because of just being open to new opportunities, I'm hoping that there's a club owner out there that sees this and says, wow, you know what? There's probably some room in the industry. Imagine all the good press and publicity that the club would get for implementing these kinds of changes, and the benefit that would create in terms of momentum behind the club. I mean, it's not just a matter of legitimizing the industry, legitimizing the franchise for the club, but it's a matter of doing the right thing. And so in my answer, my last line is, so who wants to do the right thing? If you do, reach out. I'm here.